Hello, I'm Mariell Jessup, the Chief Science and Medical Officer of the American Heart Association. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Gary Foster, the Chief Scientific Officer at WW, and the founder and former director of the Center for Obesity Research and Education at Temple University in Philadelphia. Gary, welcome. It's such a pleasure to be talking to you.
Thanks, Mariell. It's nice to be with you.
You have an accomplished history as a thought leader in cognitive behavioral therapy. And I know our listeners are keen to understand the connection between mindset and health outcomes, especially after 18 months of the pandemic.
Yeah, it really goes back to work that was done in the 1960s at the University of Pennsylvania by Aaron Beck, who really developed the field of cognitive therapy. And what 60 years of science since then has told us quite convincingly is that what you think determines how you feel, and how you feel determines what you do. So the shortcut when talking to patients, when talking to people trying to make a variety of different changes, whether those changes are taking their meds more regularly, whether it's eating differently, moving differently, is if you change what you think, you can change what you do. And that's really harnessing the power and the science of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Wow, that offers so much promise for people. But I think you've talked a lot about thinking habits. I mean, you said what you think can change what you do, but explain a little bit more about the process of developing some habits as a result of thinking.
Right. So I think the good news is that just like we think about other things from habits, our eating habits, our work habits, our relationship habits, our activity habits, and those habits can be changed and they can be modified. There's a whole science around that. And I think what people are less familiar with is thinking about their thoughts because they can't see them as clearly as their behaviors, that those are habitual as well. And there are certain types of thinking styles or thinking habits that are actually not so useful when it comes to making behavior changes. So common ones are things like all or none. I see myself as a success or a failure. I'm good or I'm bad. Foods are good or they're bad. So that kind of thinking style allows you to do an off-ramp of any weight, wellness, or medical journey pretty easily because you make a very quick, often unrealistic, often unconscious decision that I've blown it. And then, everything else goes to the side. So that's one common one. Another type of thinking habit that's not so helpful for people is one called selective filtering. And that's where looking at over the last 30 days, and I forgot to take my meds one day, or even one part of one day. I forgot I got my morning meds, but not my night meds. And people will perseverate on the time that they, in their minds, messed up, rather than the 29 or 29 and a half other times that they knocked it out of the park. So those are two ways of thinking. And the bottom line with thinking habits is not to change yourself to everything's positive. Sometimes things stink. Like I had a setback and I wish I hadn't, but it doesn't say anything about me as a person. And the goal of cognitive therapy is to view things realistically, not just positively.
So I love that approach. So I'm a fair, fat, and 40. I wish woman who wants to start making some changes in my life. What might be the first positive thought I could have? Let's be real down in the weeds and say what would I do first and what would I do second?
Yeah, the first starts with goal setting. And that's where there's this meshing, if you will, of how you're thinking and what you're doing. So often people want to begin a self-improvement project with bold, bodacious goals. I'm going to lose 50 pounds. I'm never going to eat chocolate chip cookies again. That may be aspirational, but it's not very actionable. So the first thing to ask yourself is, what's the smallest, most specific step you could make to get to your eventual North Star? And the beauty of these small specific steps is that a plan that's specific will lead to other questions like, how is that going to happen? If my goal is to become more active, how do I'm going to do that? Well, first thing is I can plan what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, I'm going to walk on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after work. How long am I going to walk? Where am I going to walk? So the more specific, the better. And that helps you set up an action plan. The other part about these small goals, in addition to being specific, is it allows you the opportunity to get rewarded, to recognize yourself for these small victories, because in fact, small goals lead to big successes. Otherwise, you don't give yourself any acknowledgement till you get to the North Star, and that's a long ways away. So small goals make a difference. The closer your goal is to where you are now, the better. Small goals are really fantastic. And the more specific goal, the more likely it will be accomplished. So now you have your starting place. The thinking style really comes when you have setbacks, because they happen to 100% of the people 100% of the time. And that's
even you.
Sad to say, it's true. I'm a part of humanity. And partly I'm joking, but it's partly like that, right? It's like saying, hey, why is it that we expect ourselves to be perfect? This really comes down to another key, I think, mindset shift for people is self-compassion. But we'll leave that aside for a second and saying that when you encounter a setback, it's really important to think realistically. Do a reality check. What are the facts to support what my thinking is? I often will say to patients, like, pretend a lawyer was interviewing you. When you say I've blown it, and a lawyer would say, well, what's the evidence that you've blown it? Are there any facts to contradict the fact that you've blown it, or that you're no good at this, or I'll never be able to do that? Those sort of words like always and never are usually red flags that you're thinking in a style that's not so helpful.
I think that's such wonderful advice. I know, taking care of patients who often had very serious medical problems like heart failure, it was really important to engage them and find something that they thought they might not be able to do. Many people came to the office thinking that if they had heart failure, for example, they shouldn't exercise at all. And we said, well, how about if you just walk down every day to your mailbox and get your mail? Now that worked for some people that lived in rural areas that had to walk 2 miles, not so much. And when they could do that, as you say, they were rewarded with the realization that they had accomplished that. So
that's exactly right. It gives fuel for the journey. As behavioral psychologists, right, we talk a lot about how do you fuel the journey and how do you reduce friction points. And those kind of walking to the mailbox, doing the smallest first step that you can, literally the first step, really makes a difference. And it gives you this sense of, to use psychological jargon, it's self-efficacy. It's belief that I can do the thing that I'm trying to do. And that's just not like a psychology feel good. There's actually significant data that it increases the likelihood of success quite dramatically.
That's so great. We in my neighborhood, we had started the tradition at the beginning of the pandemic to have movie night, and my neighbor put out an outdoor screen because, of course, at the height of COVID, that's what we thought we had to do. And I live in Massachusetts, so it was cold. And one of our favorite movies was Brittany Runs a Marathon. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's exactly this issue. She's depressed. She doesn't have a job. She doesn't like her friends. And she one day decides she's going to do a marathon. She's overweight, out of shape. And her first goal is just to walk down to the corner and back. I think one of the nicest things about it is that at one point she really starts to fail. And we were all very engaged in watching her fail and what it took for people to recover. So please talk a little bit about what friends and family can do to help somebody on this journey. Because you're right, the person's attitude and their individual health, but we all want to help not just our patients, but our family members and our friends.
I think the first step is to be very clear about making assumptions that A, people want your help, or B, and most commonly, that you know what's helpful. So I think opening questions like, is there something I could do to help, is a very open-ended, non-judgmental thing, rather than I'll do this for you or I'll do that for you, because maybe this or that isn't that helpful. And maybe right at that moment, depending on the complexity of the day and what's getting them up or down, they might not be ready to hear it. So it's always a great opportunity when somebody's talking about whatever's bothering them, not just out of the blue, you bring it up, to ask, what could I do? Is there anything I can do to help? I'm really here to help you. And then it's really important for the person who's getting the help to be enabled and empowered that you decide what's helpful to you and what's not. Some people say, watch what I'm eating. Well, that usually doesn't work out so well, because the first time somebody makes a comment about what you have, it's like, that's none of your business. It's my,
Right.
So decide. Sometimes it's things that people are doing that you would like them to stop doing. Many examples of people who are on a weight and wellness journey, and they say things like, be really helpful for me if you wouldn't eat ice cream in front of the TV while we're watching TV every night. Or it'd be really helpful if you did the dishes or took care of the kids for 15 or so minutes so I could get a walk in. So being really, again, specific about what things are helpful to you and ask for more of that, and what things are not helpful. But from the helper's perspective, sort of stay in your swim lane, look for the opportunity when somebody's already talking about an issue, and then ask, what can you do to help?
That's such great advice as well. Thank you. Gary, you've been as a volunteer in the American Heart Association's CEO Roundtable in support of WW CEO Mindy Grossman. Let's switch a little bit. And how should employers be thinking about employee health programs that are the most effective to inspire positive behavioral change? In a way, the employer is the friend that you said, don't let's not interpret what everyone needs, but what can employers do?
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to frame it, as the employer as the friend. One of the great opportunities that employers have is that they have the ability to reach millions of people, hundreds of millions of people. I think the other great thing about the power of community in an employer setting is the ability to normalize some things. So whether that's a physical community or a virtual community, often it's people around you who aren't in the thick of it with you, but have a shared experience, who can call you out in a friendly way, much like a friend would, and to say that's really not the case. Like, just because you had, again, you had one stumble, you had one setback, that does not make a journey. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. The other thing, as you hinted in your question, I think, is that really scaling scientifically based approaches. And cognitive behavioral therapy, positive psychology are psychological sciences that have enormous impact on the health and wellness of large populations. So concepts like leveraging your strengths from positive psychology, self-compassion, starting a journey with a sense of, I'm worth taking care of myself fundamentally as I am right this moment. That gives fuel for the journey, rather than I'm weak-willed, here I am again, how did I let myself get in this place? That's self-criticism, and self-compassion beats self-criticism every time.
So have you heard of employers, or maybe I should ask you what you're doing at WW to empower your employees? How do you make them feel that they're worth these changes? What kinds of things do you do in the workplace? If you have a workplace right now, I don't know.
We're a work from wherever workplace, but we still have a workplace, right? It's changing times, and we still have to reach out to our employees in ways that are meaningful to them. So as one example, we have a Thursday Thrive series where we'll bring in a variety of different speakers, whether it's self-compassion, whether it's recovering from setbacks, whether it's professional advancement, and actually to share the science. I think there's two important things when you're trying to capture people's attention. One is to share the science about why this makes a difference. And I don't mean lots of p-values or statistical tests or a lot of other things, but just saying, look, this isn't just we're saying something because we think it's a good idea. It actually works. And then the second thing, and this is really important, and it's part of our, it's important to our brand for our members, it's important to our brand for our employees, is to distill that into practical, actionable, science-based techniques. Because it's one thing to say to people, this is what you should do. You should treat yourself with self-compassion. Okay, maybe I believe that, but how do I do that? Well, there are proven techniques like talk to yourself like a friend, write yourself a self-compassion letter, compare how you talk to yourself to how you would talk to a friend in the same situation. For gratitude, there's a 3 good things technique. So really anchoring at both ends of the science. What's the science of why this makes a difference? But then importantly, what are the techniques that have been proven to drive the construct that we're trying to drive?
Hearing you talk about those, I can appreciate again the WW app for healthy change and weight loss, because what impresses me so much is the amazing amount of positive, encouraging posts from other people congratulating people for, a couple of very positive changes or a couple pounds lost. It's such a wonderful, positive environment, even though it's online. And I wish we could replicate that in many other environments.
Yeah, thanks. We're really proud of that. It's called our Connect community. It's a virtual community, and leverages what happened to our founder 60 years ago, who realized it's easier to do this stuff with others than by yourself, and whether it's physical or virtual now. And to your point, it's not just always about weight loss. It's the most common hashtag is NSV, non-scale victories. And it's those things that give people fuel. I'm upset because I gained a pound this week, but the community can say, well, are you able to go up steps with less shortness of breath? Are you able to roll around on the floor a little bit better with your kids or your grandkids? And anchoring, normalizing, being more realistic about that is really what the heart of cognitive behavioral therapy is all about.
Well, that really leads me into the last question, which is, it sounds like people have a great opportunity to not only improve their health and their well-being, but their overall sense of personal worth. And I guess your personal worth is enhanced by being healthy and by having a sense of well-being, but there's more in that what you can do with your friends and your family. Is there more to personal growth than being able to have thinking habits?
I think it starts with that. I mean, I think most people don't need a whole lot of help with the what. Now, clearly some people do, and certainly in medical arenas, that you need physicians and healthcare providers to be able to say, these are the behaviors, these are the meds, et cetera. But once you have the how, once you have the what, it's the how is so critically important. And I think that's where thinking habits come into. And going back to this universal state of humanity, we all have setbacks. That's when these thinking styles are most important. So if you can expect setbacks and recover from them, and the recovery from them is how you're thinking. Do I think of myself as somebody who needs to have all these weaknesses remedied? Or do I think of myself someone who's fundamentally of value right now, right this second as I am? Then the journey, the self-improvement journey, becomes something I'm doing for myself, not against myself. So 2 parts to this. One is how you think about yourself as of value, self-compassionately, then how you think about the journey. That setbacks are an opportunity to learn things, so-called growth mindset, where a fixed mindset would say, oh, that's just the way it is. Here I go again. Those are the facts. I guess it's just going to be that way. And that distinction between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset can make all the difference in the world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foster, Gary, for your insights and your compassion and your encouragement. I know many of your insights we discussed today are also covered in your new book, The Shift, which is available on October 5th. So we look forward to that. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Mariell. It's been great chatting with you.